So now let's look at what would happen if we decided we wanted to use one part of Font Awesome. Let's say, for example, we want to be able to throw in the Font Awesome icons wherever we wanted using just those FA class names. Let's take a look at how we would just add that to our CSS without having to include the entire CSS of the full library. Okay, so if we go to our File Explorer and we look at our Font Awesome directory here and we expand the SCSS folder, you'll see that there's a whole slew of partials as well as one main file. Now, if we open up fontawesome.scss, you'll see that all this file is, much like our styles.scss, is just a set of imports. Now, the order here is important. First, the variables are pulled in. Next, the mixins. And now, while we haven't used mixins, we've talked about these. They're like functions that generate CSS rules. Next is path, core, and then here's a set of the features, but separated out into different partials. So there's the larger, where we can use FA-2x in order to make a bigger icon. There's fixed width that allows for the alignment of text, even if you're using variable width icons, the lists, and so on. So let's look at these one by one and figure out what we actually need to pull in order to get the icons, which is the only part that we want right now. So let's do a quick preview of the variables. So I can do a preview here in Finder by pressing the spacebar. Now if we look down here, this is actually pretty long, but the bulk of these are pointing to the Unicode characters for each of the different icons. Up here, there's more general variables. Now let's say we just included this partial with our CSS. Even though it would get pulled in when we're generating our CSS from our SASS files, it won't generate any additional CSS because it's just defining variables. So if we decide to add this in, it's not going to bloat our CSS code at all. Okay, so what's the next partial that gets pulled in? Mixins. Let's take a look at what's in there. Okay, so we have 3 mixins defined, and while flip and rotate sound like they're going to be used for features that we don't need right now, this mixin here, FA icon, sounds likely to be something that we need. We'll have to keep that in mind. Okay, so let's look at the next import, path. So we'll preview this. So all this does is it adds our font face definition. It uses a variable in here in a unique way. This looks very similar to what we have now in our base partial. It's just concatenating a variable in here in a slightly different way that looks a bit more efficient. So what we did was we took the path, we did a plus sign, which is the concatenation operator, and then we added the font name. What's happening in here is it's inserting a variable into a string by using the hash sign and then curly brackets around the variable name. We'll have to consider using this syntax in the future. So again, all this is what we already have. So this is something that we can skip including. All right, and then let's go back to our editor. Let's take a look at what core is. So here's core. Let's do a quick preview. Okay, so this is one CSS rule, and it's using the FA CSS prefix variable. Let's look at what that is real quick. So here's what it is right here. And the default is FA. So in the examples that we were looking at on the Font Awesome website, all of the elements that used Font Awesome had the FA class, and then all of the other classes were prefixed with FA. So here in core, it's giving some defaults for the .fa or the FA class. So this is something that we'll definitely need to include. Let's go back to the editor. And then from here, it seems obvious that each one of these partials has to do with a specific feature of Font Awesome that we can either include or leave out. Right now, I think the only one that we would want is the icons, but let's take a look at the icons partial just to make sure. So this looks right. It's just a big long list of all of the icons that we could possibly use, setting a selector, and then pulling in the Unicode icon that would go with this class. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our editor, and I'm going to copy this full list right here, and I'm going to go to our styles.scss. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put any third-party SASS up at the very top so that we have every opportunity to override any of the CSS that it generates. Now we know we can remove all of these. We're going to keep core, we'll remove path, and now we need to point these to the right location in our file system. So what we're looking at is the position of these files in relation to the styles.scss file, which is right here. So we're going to go up one level to go to the base, and then we're going to drill down in the Bower Components, Font Awesome, and then SCSS. Unfortunately, we can't use variables inside of an import statement, so we'll have to copy this path for these 4 partials. So we'll go up one directory, then Bower Components, Font Awesome, and then SCSS. And now let's just copy this and we'll paste it in. And now let's save this and go back to the browser and refresh. Okay, so far looks good. We have no errors. Now let's see if we can use those classes in order to pull in an icon. So I'll go back to our index.html page, and let's just try doing it with this blog item here. So here's the element. Let's add a couple of classes. So first we need FA, and then let's do FA, and this is kind of nice. PHP Storm is pulling in the list of classes that we can use. Let's use FA Android to pull in the Android icon. Let's add a closing quote. We'll save this, jump back to the browser and refresh, and sure enough, there we go. So again, having the freedom to just throw in a class and be able to change the visual output of the page without having to write any of our own CSS can be really useful at times. So you'll have to decide for your projects whether it's worth pulling in this extra CSS and throwing in these classes that don't necessarily line up with the SMAC system or offer any semantic meaning for our HTML. Because we're just pulling in the partials that we need for our project, we've minimized the amount of CSS that we pull in from the Font Awesome project. So instead of that full 29 or 25 kilobyte CSS file being generated, it's going to be just part of that. And then later, if we want to pull in additional features, we can simply add those partials to our styles.scss file up here. Okay. Let's clean up here. I'm going to remove these classes from our anchor tag and save. And then I'll go back to our styles.scss and I'll remove these imports for Font Awesome, and everything should be good to go here.